the recording. It's 6 o'clock. Let's get this show on the road. Yeah, assignment 2 was due tonight. We'll start. I'll start off pretty much as usual. Going to run through the syllabus, do a check-in where we are, talk a little bit about the next assignment, and then for tonight's lecture, we'll be talking about the next assignment, assignment 3, and also starting to dig into more of the law stuff around privacy. So syllabus wise, we are now in week 6. Tonight, assignment 2 was due at 6 p.m. Hopefully everybody got their assignments in on time. We had a few folks that requested reviews. There was one that came in really early Tuesday morning, and I'm sorry I wasn't able to get to that one. This has been a crazy week at work, and hopefully things on that front will get better soon too. So where are we going in the class next? We're going to be talking about the privacy impact assessment, what it is, what it's for, when you do it, and then we'll be talking specifically about the expectations of the next assignment, assignment 3. So we've got almost 1, 2, 3 weeks until assignment 3 comes due. That'll be October 15th at 6 o'clock. Also notice, for those of you that weren't here last week or didn't see the lecture, we updated the October 15th session. So we are not going to do a lecture. We're not going to have a graded discussion, but you will have the opportunity to share what you do to make you feel human in lieu of coming to class. It turns out that Jennifer and I are both going to be out of town and not able to lecture, so we just shifted things around a little bit. So we'll take that sort of as a mid-semester mental health break to make sure everybody's up and running. You'll be at an Army conference in DC. I can't wait to hear it about it in the discussion. Any other questions about the syllabus and the work coming up? All right, let me close that. And let's jump over to the project assignment. So now you've done assignment 1, the first year CPO plan. You've submitted assignment 2, the privacy policy and your privacy notice for EWS. Next up is the privacy impact assessment template that will be due on October 15th. And let's talk a little bit about that. So using the information provided above and any additional information you deem relevant, provide a privacy impact assessment template to be used when acquiring new technologies to reduce the risk of privacy issues for Quantum Leap. So we'll be going into detail tonight about what a privacy impact assessment is for. It's essentially a risk reduction tool when you're making some substantive changes. One example that comes to mind, if I'm migrating data from a legacy system, I would want to conduct a privacy impact assessment to see if there are any privacy related risks associated with that activity. It is important to note, and this is one of those things that folks often get wrong or misunderstand. We are not asking you to conduct a privacy impact assessment on anything. Instead, as the Chief Privacy Officer, you are requiring the organization to conduct a privacy impact assessment before taking on new things. So in your role as Chief Privacy Officer, you are adopting the privacy impact assessment template that will be used by others in order to conduct the PIA, presumably for your review before taking any action. That's all I'm going to say about that at this point on this page. And like I said, we'll go into greater detail here in just a little bit. So any questions about that before I move on? All right. So I'm going to go into lecture mode. So if the company buys new software, we do that. That would be an example, yes, where I would want to possibly conduct a PIA. Not necessarily every time for every piece of software, but that is an example of an appropriate time to conduct a PIA. So tonight, so the sad news is, unlike Jennifer's lectures where everybody is always excited about getting out early, the tendency for my lectures is to take almost the whole class period. I don't run or rush through the materials. I'm not in any kind of hurry. Do try to cover everything that I think is important. But just it tends to take almost the whole time. So what are we going to do tonight? We're going to talk about privacy impact assessments. We're going to talk about privacy as a right. We'll talk a little bit more in detail. Where did it come from? What does it mean? And then we're going to also discuss privacy law to better understand the privacy rights that employees might have and the implication for privacy policies. So again, privacy impact assessment template, due October 15th, 15% of your grade. The idea is to provide us a template that would be used by other parts of the organization when acquiring new technologies in order to reduce the risk of privacy issues for Quantum Leap. So why do we do PIAs? The ultimate goal really is about reducing the risk of taking on new work. It's, as I mentioned, it's really a risk management technique. If there were folks in class, I would ask how many of you have ever engaged in a project, perhaps a data related or technology related project, where no assessment was done of the potential impact, either privacy related or otherwise, regarding the risks of the project. As a project manager, one of the most important areas that we try to focus on while managing projects is to constantly analyze the risks of engaging in the work to generate the outcome of a project. So from the project management perspective, it's very front of mind that we're thinking about risks and looking for ways to reduce or eliminate those risks. And a PIA is really a good tool to have in your arsenal as a technologist or a data specialist, to be able to bring to an organization to help reduce the risk of engaging in a new project. One, as a result of this, because it is about risks, one of the important things that we want to see come out of a privacy impact assessment is a good analysis of the risks. In addition to identifying those potential risks, there should be a way to analyze the impact of those risks. So we'll talk about identifying the risks that might be that might arise during the course of a project, and also how might we address or respond to those risks if they are realized. Another, I think, important aspect of the PIA is it helps reinforce in an organization the privacy mindset and the notion of privacy by design. So we're not thinking about privacy related issues or risks after we've already done the project, after we've already done the work. If we do it before the work begins, then we reinforce that privacy mindset and contribute to the notion of privacy by design. So we're thinking about privacy before we're doing the thing, so it increases the likelihood that we're identifying those risks and doing a better job at protecting privacy and addressing privacy related issues. When you get started on your next assignment, you will not have any trouble, I think, finding lots and lots of good examples of privacy impact assessments. There are a lot of federal government organizations that conduct them routinely, and they've got some good, solid information that you would be able to use to build the template for the structure for the assignment. So here on the right side of the screen might be a piece that you might want to include in your privacy impact assessment template. So here we have abstract. The abstract is a single paragraph that will be used to describe the program and the PIA. It will be published on the DHS website and Federal Register. It should be a minimum of 3 sentences and a maximum of 4, and conform to the following format. So here we have very specific guidance on what is expected to be included in a privacy impact assessment. This is not itself a privacy impact assessment, but it's a template that provides the guidance to the employees to be able to conduct the assessment and then provide it to appropriate persons in the organization to continue the analysis. Any questions so far? I'm gonna play one of these. I'm going to attempt to play one of these. I am not going to play all of these. They're YouTube videos, but it's a pretty cool guide provided by Australia on conducting privacy impact assessments. So I'm going to see if this will work. Let's see. Everything can be harmful. Do you want to continue? Yes. Cannot open the specified file. Okay. Try this again. Of course it's not. Let's see. Okay. I'm determined to show at least one of these. Really. There we go.
If you are designing a new product or service or changing a process that involves personal information, you need to think about privacy. Issues around privacy can determine the success or failure of your project. Any project that involves personal information can be risky. If you ignore privacy, you could lose your customers' trust, damage your reputation, fail to meet community expectations, breach the Australian privacy principles. A Privacy Impact Assessment, or PIA, is an essential tool to help manage, minimise and eliminate privacy risks. If your project involves personal information,
Excuse me, Tim.
PIA. By doing this at the beginning of your project, you'll be able to adjust its design if needed to ensure all personal data is safely handled. Depending on the size and complexity of the project, you may even need to conduct more than one. A PIA can help to ensure that
you need to mute your mic.
Respected and protected. Using
I pushed
PIAs
the
is a
mute button
great way
and
to
that didn't
improve
work.
your organisation's privacy practices, and the Office of the Australian Information Commissioner is here to help. Make PIAs part of your business as usual thinking and build privacy in from the start. For more information, visit www.oaic.gov.au. If your project involves personal information, then you will most likely need to do a privacy impact assessment. A PIA is a flexible process that should be tailored to your project and circumstances. The amount of effort involved will vary according to the nature, size, and complexity of the project. Follow these 10 steps when completing your PIA. 1. Threshold assessment. Use this initial step to determine if you need to do a PIA. 2. Plan your PIA. You need to decide how detailed it will be, who will conduct it, how long it will take, who will be consulted, and how recommendations will be implemented. 3. Describe the project. This information is important as it provides context for the rest of the PIA. 4. Identify and consult with stakeholders. Consulting with stakeholders can help you identify new privacy risks or concerns you may not have originally considered. 5. Map the information flows. You need to know what information will be collected, how it is used and disclosed, how it will be stored and protected, and who will have access to it. 6. Privacy impact analysis and compliance check. Analyse how the project impacts on privacy both positively and negatively. Consider any privacy impacts and community expectations. A compliance check against the Australian privacy principles will identify if the project could interfere with an individual's privacy. 7. Managing privacy impacts. This is the time to develop strategies to remove, minimise or mitigate privacy impacts. 8. Make recommendations. Pinpoint strategies to avoid or minimise risks. 9. Prepare a report. This needs to be practical and easy to read. And the final step in the PIA process is 10. Respond and review. Make sure the recommendations are adopted and monitor their progress.
Okay. Now back to the show. Okay. Again, sorry about the audio there. I'm not going to play the rest of these, but the links are available in the slide deck. Just based on watching the first couple, do you guys have any feedback about that? Is it starting to make sense what we're doing with a privacy impact assessment? And again, the goal of the next assignment is not to conduct one. I mean, these series of YouTube shorts are about the process of conducting one, but it has really good information that you can use to build a template that would be used by the organization to require other people to conduct a privacy impact assessment. So when do you do it? Here's some examples of when one might want to conduct a privacy impact assessment. Conversion of information from anonymous to identifiable format. So maybe we have lots of examples of data sets where we may be merging data. And maybe in that process of merger, some of the data that may not include personal identifiable information, maybe as a result of this merger will include such information. Conversion of records from paper-based to electronic format. Can anybody see why we might want to do a PIA if we're taking paper records and digitizing them? Cyber threat, possibly. So one of the things that has happened as a result of my work over the last couple of decades, in the early 2000s, there was virtually no court information in the state of Arkansas available online anywhere to anybody. And over the last couple of decades, by implementing a case management system and electronic filing, we now have many terabytes of documents, court documents, some of which are very sensitive, that we're responsible for storing, both for public access, the public documents, and then for internal court access for those documents that are not deemed to be public. So that transformation of case records, what we would say is that in the past, court case information existed in practical obscurity. You had to know a lot of information about the case that you were looking for. You had to know what court was it in. You had to know a case number or the party names to be able to locate it. You had to travel to the courthouse where the information was stored and hopefully get a nice clerk to be able to help you retrieve the case file. So all of that information, while it existed 2 decades ago, it existed in practical obscurity because you had to know what you were going to look for in order to go get it. Today is a totally different situation. We have members of the media, we have what we call title searchers, people who are actively looking every day for court filings that could impact the title to land through judgments, for example. These folks are constantly watching every day for something interesting to come across their screens. So that data is no longer just stored away in a dusty file in a basement in a courthouse. It's available essentially to anybody on the internet. So we had to give a lot of thought to the risk related issues before beginning any of those projects that impacted the conversion of paper information to electronic information. Already mentioned significant merging, matching, and manipulation of multiple databases containing personal information. So when we're taking multiple data sources and trying to mix and match and merge those things, there is an inherent risk involved that needs to be identified and thought given about how to manage that risk. One of the responsibilities that we have in providing a jury management system is that we have to take voter records and in some places driver records, and we have to use vital records where they have information about people who've passed away. We have criminal records from the Crime Information Center about people who've been convicted of felonies, and we have to manipulate that information from these multiple sources with the goal of having a good list of potential jurors in every county in the state of Arkansas that's using our system. So we spend a lot of time thinking about how to avoid the risks related to that process. If we inadvertently identify someone as dead who is not, then they'll never have an opportunity to serve on a jury. Application of user authentication technology to a publicly accessible system. Here's an example of trying to make information more readily available. But at the same time, we want to identify who the users are that are going to be accessing this information. System management changes involving significant new uses and or application of new technologies. So this isn't necessarily buying new software or implementing new software, but changing the way that we're managing the system that we're already responsible for. Here's some more examples. Retiring of systems that held or processed personal data. Right now, we're in the midst of building a new court case management system. We intend to, as we start rolling out the system, to pull legacy data out of legacy systems, multiple legacy systems, into the new system. And as we do that, we hope to retire those legacy systems. The act of shutting down a system or retiring, sunsetting a system is one of those activities that is suitable for a PIA. What's going to happen to the data that we've collected? This data in this legacy system, how long do we preserve it or keep it before it's completely destroyed? How can we be sure that it's completely destroyed? Incorporation of personal information obtained from commercial or public sources into existing databases. So there are lots of services available today. The National Change of Address records is one of those examples where for our voters, for our potential jurors, it would be nice to have the most current address information so that we're not wasting time and effort sending jury summons to people who have moved to another county or moved to another address. So that's an example. If I were going to incorporate one of these services into a system that already exists, I would need to conduct a PIA. Significant new interagency exchanges. Again, we exchange information with multiple other state agencies. And as a result of that, if we make any changes, we receive electronic citations, we receive driver information data, we send conviction information to the Crime Information Center and to driver services. So as we're building our new case management system, we're going to have to rebuild all of these data exchanges that already exist. Excuse me. And as a result, since we're making significant changes to our interagency exchanges, we will need to conduct PIAs to ensure that we're appropriately addressing the risks as we're moving from system to system. I'm going to drop down to the last one, implementation of projects using third-party service providers. It's common in government to contract with third-party entities to do work. Sometimes we have to contract with a company to do all of the work. So if we're doing a project and engaging someone else to do that work, part of the analysis that we would need to conduct is the risk analysis, the PIA analysis related to engaging in a contract where we're using third-party service providers. I hate to read slides, but some of this is pretty important. One of the challenges, and this was mentioned in the YouTube video earlier, is making that determination whether I even need to conduct a privacy impact assessment. So one of the tools or techniques to do that is to conduct a privacy threshold analysis, or as noted on the screen, an express PIA. So this is essentially a small questionnaire that assesses the need for a full and more comprehensive PIA. So if I were building a privacy impact assessment template for a company, in order to save time and effort, I would probably want to include something like this threshold analysis that would be required to be completed first, so that we're not wasting a bunch of company resources on conducting PIAs that are totally unnecessary. So if we include something along those lines in our template to direct the organization to conduct a threshold analysis before actually engaging in the full PIA, this helps make sure that we're actually making better use of the resources that we have. And it may help early on identify some potential risks that may be involved. Maybe the person responsible for conducting the PIA doesn't really think it's necessary, and they go through this threshold analysis. Maybe that's sufficient to help them understand that the threat, the risk, is sufficiently substantial to justify going through the cost of a full privacy impact assessment. This is a list of some PIA guidelines. It's from the International Standards Organization, 29134. This is coming out of the text, not the required text, but the optional text that we have for the class. I'm going to run through some of these things. After conducting a threshold analysis to determine whether PIA is needed, performing the PIA is completed in the following steps. Identify information flows, analyze the implications of the use case, determine the relevant privacy safeguarding requirements, assess privacy risk using risk identification, analysis, and evaluation, prepare to treat the privacy risk and create a privacy risk treatment plan. So again, because this is a privacy risk assessment tool, we need to spend some effort as we're conducting a PIA or building a PIA template to be sure that we're collecting the right information in order to assess the risk related to privacy. And this one continues, prepare and publish the PIA report, implement the privacy risk treatment plan, review the PIA, and make changes to the process. So it's a cyclical process. It's not one where you go through the exercise and you're done. I've crossed my T's and dotted my I's so I don't have to think about it anymore. It really should be treated as a document, an organic document through the life of the project, so that if new risks arise that maybe weren't considered during the process of the PIA, that the organization is ready to face those things. Here is some good guidance on what would be included in the PIA report. So this is the thing, if you were the chief privacy officer for an organization and you're directing someone to conduct the PIA, the output of the PIA is in the form, or should be in the form, of a report. So I would expect to provide guidance to my fellow employees about what to include in the report after you engage in the PIA activities. The structure of the PIA report should include sections on the scope of the assessment, privacy requirements, risk assessment, risk treatment plan, and conclusions and decisions. Risk assessment includes discussion of the risk sources, threats, and their likelihood, consequences, and their level of impact, risk evaluation, and compliance analysis. And then you might also require that the report include a summary that could be made public should the need arise. So again, if I were working on the next assignment, part of the direction to those engaged in completing a PIA template, filling it in with the information for a PIA, might be to require a report and specifically state the sections that should be provided when the report is completed. Let's see if some of these work. Okay. So this is a Federal Trade Commission website where they have examples of privacy impact assessments that have been completed. Some of the examples, Adobe Sign. I'm going to jump onto that one real quick. So the Federal Trade Commission conducted a PIA. Document is 12 pages. Here are the contents overview, data type sources, data access and sharing, notice and consent, data accuracy and security, retention, disposal, website privacy evaluation, privacy risks and evaluation. So FTC strives to protect consumers from fraudulent, deceptive, unfair practices in the marketplace. Blah, 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 blah. Adobe Sign is a FedRAMP authorized cloud-based signature service. Da, 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 da. So they're talking about what is the project, what's the nature of the thing that we're doing. Here's one way to identify what are the elements that might be included in a PIA. Types of information other than PII that will be collected and disseminated. Purpose for the collection. Source of the information. So these questions and the guidance provided is the structure, the template that the Federal Trade Commission uses to conduct their privacy impact assessments. I will note that a private organization conducting a PIA is probably going to be different than what would be done by a federal government agency. Here's one from Justice. This is pretty old. This is in the form of a template. So this is what they're telling you that you need to complete in order to provide a privacy impact assessment. Section 1, description of the information system. Section 2, information in the system with checklists of identifying data. Section 3, why are we using the system? Section 4, information sharing. Who's going to see this stuff? Section 6, information security. Are there privacy impact or Privacy Act implications? So this is an example of a template provided by a federal government agency a long time ago, but it's still out there. GSA, here's another collection of privacy impact assessments conducted. This is GSA, the Government Services Administration, General Services Administration. Open one of these real quick. What's the document about? General information. Purpose of collection, openness and transparency. Data quality, integrity, security, awareness and training, accountability and auditing. So again, here's another example of a PIA that was conducted. And then let's see if, okay, let's see if I can mute.
Welcome to the demo of the U.S. Federal Agency Threshold Analysis and Privacy Impact Assessment. In this demo, these two templates will be linked together to demonstrate how they can be used to first gather preliminary information about a project or system and determine whether a full privacy impact assessment is required, and second, to conduct a full privacy impact assessment if necessary. These templates are based on the Department of Homeland Security's Privacy Threshold Analysis and Privacy Impact Assessment templates, which are publicly available at dhs.gov. To begin the workflow, the project approver would assign the privacy threshold analysis to a respondent, who typically would be someone at a component office of the agency. The respondent would then fill out the PTA and submit it back to the approver. The PTA includes a variety of question types, including free-form text, multi-select questions, as well as yes/no responses. The threshold also includes a section where the respondent can provide their own recommendation as to whether or not a PIA or other steps are required. After the respondent has completed the threshold and submitted it back to the approver can then review the answers that were provided by the respondent. Here they can flag risks, add recommendations for how to mitigate the risk, as well as request more information if needed. The approver can then add their determination of whether or not a PIA or other next steps are required. If the approver determines that a PIA is needed, it can then be sent to the respondent, who will be greeted with welcome text explaining what a PIA is, what it should accomplish, and its purposes. The respondent can then begin to move through the various sections and answer the PIA questions. The questions are a combination of free-form text, multi-select, and yes/no questions. Each question also includes a text box where the respondent can provide additional information or context where necessary. This allows the federal agency to provide the narrative-based PIA in order to tell the story to the executive branch or to the public at large, in accordance with the Privacy Act and E-Government Act.
I'm going to go ahead and stop it there, but you get the gist, and feel free to watch the rest of it if you're so inclined. The interesting thing
When
about
the respondent
this,
is finished, they can then submit the PIA back to the approver.
go away. The interesting thing about it, the approach, yeah, the digital process that they developed, I guess trying to streamline the process, and that initial assessment, so that privacy threshold assessment that is conducted first before deciding whether to go any further in order to know whether a full privacy impact assessment is needed. So to me, it seems like a really good idea. Again, if I were building a template to guide my organization, I think I would want to invest some effort in providing that threshold analysis template as well before requiring the PIA. Along with that, though, you've got to think about this is also in the nature of a policy document. So you're not just tossing something over the fence and hope that people pick it up and do something with it. You have to provide some guidance to the organization about the appropriate uses of it. Let's dig a little bit more. The GDPR requires a data protection impact assessment, a DPIA. Very similar types of information, similar criteria, But again, this can provide good guidance for you as you're thinking about the nature of the PIA that's going to be required by Quantum Leap Incorporated. In the United States, there's no requirement, there's no regulation that I'm aware of that requires anybody to conduct a PIA before engaging in a technology project. GDPR is different. They've taken a different approach and require the PIA to be conducted. It requires at least 4 essential aspects: systematic description of the processing operations and purpose, assess the necessity and proportionality of the processing in relation to the purposes, risks to the rights and freedoms of the data subjects must also be included. Finally, the measures taken to address the risks should be presented. These measures can include safeguards, security measures, and other mechanisms to protect personal data. Again, this is the European perspective, the European approach in requiring and taking privacy very seriously, and then requiring that the assessments actually be conducted. So, assignment 3. You're going to use the information provided in the scenario and create a privacy impact assessment template to be used when acquiring new technologies to reduce the risk of privacy issues for Quantum Leap. You're not conducting a PIA, but as the CPO, you're bringing these guidelines to the organization. You should not just turn in a questionnaire. You need to provide guidance to the organization on when and how to conduct a PIA, guidance on the risk analysis, and some guidance on what happens next. It's not sufficient just to turn in a list of questions and say, here's the PIA template. It's a policy-like document where you as the CPO are requiring the organization to engage in this activity. So I'm going to pause again to see if there are any questions.
I am worried about the plagiarism detector with using, I guess, multiple choice and multi-select and any part that's not really free form in the questionnaire parts, that it may.
So as we've told you guys many times, the plagiarism issue is not our concern. As practicing professionals, we are going to rely heavily on materials that are readily available. We're not going to, when you're out in the real world doing this work or any work, it's not for academic purposes, it's for practical purposes. And maybe that's how this class is going to be very different from any of the other classes you're going to take. We don't care where you get those resources. We don't care what resources you use. You have to tell us what you used, where it's from, but we don't want you to recreate the wheel. It has to be tailored to the circumstances though. So if you created a PIA template and the questions were all about enhancing a streaming service, and maybe you happen to borrow it from Netflix, that wouldn't be appropriate for the circumstances we provided. But if you wanted to use a Netflix PIA template to modify and customize to our circumstances, we would absolutely love that. I hope that helps your fears a little bit, Jerica. So it's really, for us, it's really not, it's not about whether you borrowed from somebody else. We encourage it, but you have to let us know who you borrowed it from, and you have to take that extra effort to analyze and synthesize and customize the output to the scenario that you have at hand. If I borrowed a PIA template from the Department of Homeland Security and told the Administrative Office of the Courts, this is our new PIA template, they would laugh me out of the building, because a substantial portion of it wouldn't apply to any of the work that we do. I would have to take the time and effort to figure out what stuff is relevant. What are the relevant questions, and when should they be asked? What is the relevant risk analysis, and when should that be conducted? Who's going to do it? The basic question, who's responsible for completing a PIA? And that's the kind of guidance that, as the CPO, you need to provide to your organization. Any other thoughts or questions or observations at this point? Does everybody have a pretty good feel, you think, for what we're expecting from the PIA template? Yes, that's one yes. Any other yeses in the room? Two yeses. All right, we almost have consensus here. Lester, anything? Emmanuel? All right. Again, it's this isn't like super complicated stuff. If you keep in mind that the reason we're doing this is to help reduce the privacy related risk of engaging in some sort of activity. If you can kind of hold that in your head while you're building this thing, and again, you have lots of flexibility. There's going to be plenty of resources out there to look at as you're building your template. But keep in mind that the reason we're doing this is not just to annoy people, but to have some impact on the potential privacy-related risks of an activity. Privacy by design, and encouraging that privacy mindset. I turned my ringer on to hear things. That's terrible. All right. So this is going to be fun because you guys, there's nobody here in the room tonight. Jennifer's not here to shake her head in amazement or disbelief when I say things. I'm hoping that we can have a little bit of discussion tonight. Otherwise, these next 4 hours are going to go very slowly. We want to spend some time thinking about just the concept of privacy. I mean, we have a whole class dedicated to privacy with a focus on the impact that technology is having on privacy and the regulations that may be involved, the laws that may be implicated. Let's spend a little time tonight going back to the basics and thinking about where this stuff comes from. Let's ask ourselves, is there a fundamental right to privacy? And I'll ask you, does anybody in the room want to answer that question? In your opinion, is there a fundamental right to privacy?
Are we supposed to raise our hands? Sorry.
You can jump in.
Okay. So I believe yes, because I believe things like my health and my financial records uh should be private unless I agree to disclose it. So
Okay.
if I give a company permission to disclose it as well, then yes. But if I say I don't want that disclosed, even things like my username, if I was to sign in a place, I feel like
Hmm.
that should be private between me and I guess the company and whatever system they're using for me to sign in. Like it shouldn't just
Okay.
be given out to anybody.
That's reasonable, I think. Are there other areas you mentioned? Financial privacy, health information privacy. Are there other areas that you have an expectation of privacy?
Uh, I have a privacy at school too.
Okay.
Uh, I feel like it shouldn't be disclosed that I'm a student here unless I agree for it to be disclosed. Like even when I do like shopping, sometimes I might ask for a discount and in order to do the discount, you know, I have to agree with Little Rock, University of Arkansas Little Rock to disclose that I'm a student, but I
Hmm.
wouldn't expect them to just disclose to anybody I'm a student who asks.
Yeah. Without giving permission, and we're pretty good about giving permission to share stuff when we're going to get stuff. So absolutely, yeah, I'm a student. Here's my address, and give me that 20% discount, please.
Yes.
Lester, what would you like to add? Lester, can't hear you, Lester. If you're talking, Lester.
I see it tied up with the basic right of ownership. One of
Okay.
the conditions of the society, our society, is that we have the right to own something, right? And
Okay.
then I
But
own.
does that
Uh-huh.
is that privacy related though?
Yes, I related to privacy because the let's say I own my horse, I own my house, and all that, right? And the components of me, okay, I also own that. What are the components of me? My name, my social security, my bank account, and all of that. So I see it in the same line, and that's I consider that one. I consider the basic principle of privacy, right?
So you realize probably just about anywhere, at least in the United States, um, if I wanted to, I could go find your home, your address, how much taxes you paid, how much you paid for it when you bought it. I can find out how much personal property tax you're paying for like cars and boats and things like that. Um, so as a result of being required to pay taxes to the government on some of these things, um, for many of these things that we might think it really is a privacy matter, a private matter, because I'm paying taxes to a government entity, there are public records that are attached to that. Were you aware of that?
Yes, you are correct.
It's
And
a little scary, I
it
think.
is, you know what I am surprised? Um, One time I searched for one of my professors for his by his name, and I
Yeah.
found the record of his salary because he was a a state employee in Arkansas. And
Yes.
then yeah, and I was like, my goodness, I go, this is what they make. And I figured that's supposed to be like private, very private type of information, but no, it's public.
And again, the private sector certainly doesn't do that, but because my salary is paid by taxes, Jennifer's salary is paid by taxes. Those are government expenditures. So as a government employee, I'm acknowledging that some of this stuff is going to be made public by virtue of me being a beneficiary of the public trust. And you could go out today and see what Jennifer's making, what I'm making. It's just a fact of life. You can download the entire spreadsheet of all state employees. If you get really, really bored and want to do some salary analysis and figure out what agencies pay the best. But again, it's something that I agree with you. Most people would think that's private, personal information. But because we work for the government, we made a decision. It's entirely my decision to work for the government. We made a decision to take this job with the understanding that some of the stuff that we do is going to be open to public scrutiny. Where does our right to privacy come from? Anybody?
The only
What's
thing I could think of is laws and safety, perhaps.
Okay, well, we'll dig into that in a little bit, where we think our sense our rights come from. And then we're going to spend a little time too talking about, as technologists, what are our responsibilities surrounding the protection of privacy. And this gets to the core of why this class exists. We've talked about privacy by design and privacy as an organizational mindset. We want, and we're preaching to the choir about this, but we want the notion of privacy and our responsibilities as technologists to be at the forefront of our minds when we're engaged in technological activities, whether we're working for a private company or a university or a state government. If I believe very strongly that if we can encourage this mindset among the students taking this class, that we can have a little bit of a difference in exposing this notion of the privacy mindset when you guys all go out into the real world. I think it's important, and I think that you all can make a difference. Lester, you had your hand up. What would you like to share, sir?
Yeah, I was thinking that where it comes from is the natural progression of society. I will say that as we learn to live in peace with each other, we figure out that privacy was a good thing, and then it got enacted in public law, and pretty much it flow from there. So evolution,
Yeah,
social evolution.
yeah. When you think about it, there was probably a long time where privacy wasn't that big of a deal because many of our ancestors lived pretty far apart from one another. So there wasn't a huge concern that people were prying or digging into our personal business because they lived 2 days ride on a mule up the river. When we started coming together into larger and larger communities, then it becomes harder and harder to maintain any kind of privacy. Just the sense of privacy about your comings and goings when you live in a big apartment building versus living out in the country and people, not paying attention or not even seeing if you're home or not. So I think you're right that it has come about as human societies have gotten bigger and bigger. What about the effect of technology on this? And are we at a point where, and I think this is a fair question to ask, is privacy today just a myth? I mean, there's a camera right here. This is being recorded. The data is being stored somewhere in some cloud place somewhere. So someone will be able to know what Lester was doing at 7:12 p.m. Central Time. Robin says it definitely feels like nothing is really private. And that's not even talking about the stuff that we willingly share. When we give our information to Kroger to get our Kroger Plus card and our discount, there are cameras everywhere. There was I should have shared the report on it, but I may have mentioned this in another class, but researchers have reached the point of being able to identify individuals just based on the way Wi-Fi signals are bouncing around. So analyzing Wi-Fi signals, and they can identify individuals from that information. It certainly seems that we have to work harder to protect our privacy than maybe we used to. And maybe in fact, privacy is a myth. But even if it is, that doesn't take away our responsibility as persons responsible for technology to do everything we can to protect the private aspects of the information that we're responsible for. I'm not going to go through this in your text, in the required text. There's a pretty cool timeline starting in antiquity, 400 BC. The Hippocratic Oath provides the first recorded expression of a duty of medical confidentiality. So 400 BC is the first human recording that we have of some sense of privacy or confidentiality. Over the course of time, I mean, from 400 BC to 1699, a couple of cases in England, they decided that peeping Toms and eavesdropping is no longer acceptable in a civilized society. I think we've all heard every man's house is his castle. That came in 1604, Semane's case. One of the things that you may notice as we move through this timeline is excuse me, society has grown more complicated. We have more and more people in the world. And as a result of that, we have more and more consideration of rules and laws that might be needed to protect privacy. So we have like one little page here from 400 BC up to 1959. On this next screen or next side of a slide, 1960 to 1979. That's like 19 years compared to 2,300 and almost 60 years. What happened in this time period in 1960 to 1979 that might have impacted interest in privacy?
Is that when computers were made or something?
Computers, technology in general. So telephones are in wide use by now. We have television, so we're seeing things broadcast. We have our TV news reports. Even if we go back just a little bit, it wasn't too far before 1960 that radio transmissions started. So we started getting live information about what's going on in the world. And then in this time from 60 to 79, the great advances in technology that we saw that led to the personal computer revolution. So television, telephones, vehicles, the ability to travel. So where it used to take months for news to travel around the world, suddenly information is going faster and faster and faster. As a kid, I remember seeing nightly news reports of the Vietnam War, and that really impacted me as a kid. In earlier days, World War II, they would have newsreels that they would compile and share in movie theaters, and that was how people saw what was going on, and that took months to be able to share that information. So not only is the volume of information increasing with the population, the types of tools that we have to share information is exploding. The speed with which that information is being shared is exploding. So we have to figure out how to address those changes in our society. And then we have 2 pages of stuff, just basically the last 40-ish years. Again, the speed of sharing information. In the 80s, we saw the personal computer revolution. In the 90s, we saw the dawn of the internet. I mean, the fact that you guys, I'm sitting here talking to you as if you're sitting here in front of me, but you're scattered around the world. I have no idea where you guys are. And we're still having a conversation. Just a few years ago, this would not have been possible. And finally, just the last few years, some of the other changes. Anyway, this is, I'm not going to read this stuff, but I think it's a good thought-provoking timeline of how the law regarding privacy has evolved as our ability to share information with technology has also evolved. Okay, let's talk about some of the United States Constitution that deals with privacy. And I am going to read some of these to you, not dramatically. The First Amendment, our Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or the press, or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. Do you guys know what the first 10 amendments to the Constitution are called? Anybody? So the first 10 amendments are called or referred to as the Bill of Rights. I believe they were adopted in 1789. 1787 was when the Constitution was ratified. 1789. The first 10 amendments were added. The Fourth Amendment is very specific about privacy, the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects, against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrants shall issue but upon probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the person or things to be seized. In law school, we have 2 or 3 classes that focus just on the Fourth Amendment, because there's a whole lot there. It's important to note that the focus around these amendments is really about a limitation on the government to be able to do things. So it's not so much about people snooping on one another or reading their social media posts, but it's really a limitation on the government to act and our right to be free of unnecessary intrusion by the federal government initially. The Fifth Amendment. Has anybody ever heard of pleading the Fifth? Yes, Jericho. On advice of counsel, I refuse to answer that on the grounds it may incriminate me. So when they don't want to talk. So the Fifth Amendment is also complicated. So I'm going to jump into that. No person shall be held to answer for a capital or otherwise infamous crime unless on a presentment or indictment of a grand jury, except in cases arising in the land or naval forces or in the militia, when in actual service in the time of war or public danger. So this basically says somebody has to claim that I did something wrong before I can be drug into court. Nor shall any person be subject for the same offense to be twice put in jeopardy of life or limb. So this is what we call the double jeopardy clause. If you're accused of a crime and you go to trial and the jury says not guilty, the Fifth Amendment says the government can't turn around and say, oh, we didn't like the outcome of that. Let's try that again. We'll do better this time. So this is an absolute prohibition on being tried for the same offense more than once. Nor shall be compelled in any criminal case to be a witness against himself. So this is your right against self-incrimination. This is where the Miranda warning came from. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be held against you in a court of law. So that's your Fifth Amendment right, that is protecting your right not to incriminate yourself, nor be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. So this amendment also says you can't kill me, you can't lock me up, you can't take my property just because you want to, government. You have to follow due process of law. That can mean a lot of things. Maybe it means I have to, the prosecutor has to file an indictment. And then you have the right to respond to that. And maybe you have the right to a jury trial for your peers to determine whether or not you're guilty of the offense. Nor shall private property be taken for public use without just compensation. So this also means government can't come in and say, we're going to build something, we're going to tear down your house and build something awesome. Get out of here, without just compensation. So the government has to pay. It's not saying that government can't ever take your property, but if government does take your property, it has to be with just compensation. The Ninth Amendment. This is a fun one and is oftentimes forgotten. The enumeration in the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people. What does this mean? And this is basically saying our rights as human beings, as citizens of the United States, are so many that just because we didn't write it down and list it in here doesn't mean that those rights don't exist. The process for identifying those things can be quite challenging, especially in court. In the 14th Amendment, so the 14th Amendment is one of the post-Civil War amendments where we had to fix things. So Section 1 of the 14th Amendment, this one has become quite a big deal this year in the United States. Section 1 of the 14th Amendment: all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. So, who might be born or naturalized in the United States and not be subject to the jurisdiction? Can anybody think of an example? Somebody that might be born here, but not be subject to the jurisdiction of the United States?
Uh, Perhaps if they move to another country.
I think Lester got it on the nose. Somebody not necessarily born inside the embassy grounds, even. I mean, they could be born in a hospital, but a child of a diplomat. So a diplomat that is here, who is not subject to the jurisdiction of the United States. They're part of the diplomatic company from another country. They're representing the other country. If they have kids in the United States, those kids are not citizens of the United States or the state where they reside, because the United States is not permitted to subject its jurisdiction over foreign diplomats. No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States. This is called the Privileges and Immunities Clause. This is where states can't erect barriers to rights that are found in the Constitution. So if I have the right to vote in one state and then I move to another state, at least with respect to my right to vote in federal elections, that cannot be removed just because I moved to another state. Nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. Now, remember, we talked about Fifth Amendment due process. So up until now, these amendments were about Congress. It was about the federal government limitation on their ability to act. With the 14th Amendment, we started applying these laws to the states. So not only can the United States not deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, under 14th Amendment due process, even a state shall provide due process before taking life, liberty, or property. Nor deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. This is called the Equal Protection Clause, and this basically says, under the law, we're going to treat people equally. Sometimes, sadly, this seems to be more aspirational than it should be, but this is where some of our key freedoms that we think about today have come from. Okay, so what do you guys think? Do we still think there's a fundamental right to privacy? At least in the United States, I absolutely. We have some fundamental rights to privacy. It's not expressly stated that you shall have a right to privacy, but there are limitations on things the government can do. They can't haul you away. They can't take your property. They can't take your life or your liberty without due process. So that kind of implicates a right to privacy. Clearly, these rights have come to us through the Constitution, through amendments to the Constitution. And I would posit that today, we still have a responsibility as technologists to be mindful of the impact to people's privacy in the things that we do. Let's see. All right, let's still a lot of stuff to go through. Let's talk about some employment privacy and the laws implicated by that. So I've already talked about, and Jennifer and I have talked about the fact that both of us are public employees. We are both employed by the government of the state of Arkansas. And there are many rules that are different depending on whether you're a public employee or a private employee. So I want to explore a little bit, again, thinking about the fact that we're public employees. Our salaries are essentially paid for by tax dollars, your money. Let's think about what are what expectation of privacy we might have in a workplace. So I'm gonna ask you guys some of these questions. Should public employees have any kind of right to privacy in the workplace?
Yes.
What do you think? Yes. Thank you. What about in my office? So my office is located in the Justice Building. It's a public building. People come in and out of it all day long. It was built with public funds. I have an office that I get to go into. I've got a desk and a table and a TV and a webcam thing and some laptops. Do I have a right of privacy in my office?
Yes, unless you're like under investigation and they need to go through your laptop and your desk.
Okay.
Otherwise, you deserve privacy.
Okay. I'll take that. What about in my desk? And when we think about privacy, what's the extent of that? If you walked into the Justice Building and said, I want to go sit in Tim Holtoff's chair and I'm going to sit at his desk and I'm going to go through his drawers, do you think anybody would let you do that?
No.
No. So it's not, I've got there's like a zone, maybe a zone of privacy, but it's certainly not absolute. I've got close to 100 employees. Most of them are accustomed to coming into my office whenever the door is open. So if the custom and practice is if a door is shut, an office door is shut, and you need somebody that you think is behind the door, you knock on the door. You don't just walk in. If you're invited in, then it's okay to come in. Usually the only reason I have my door shut is I'm on some kind of a webinar, web call, Zoom thing, or sometimes if I'm having to counsel employees, I'll have my door shut. Again, to protect their privacy while we're engaging in a conversation. I also, when my door is open, And I just noticed today, I have a candy dish. I keep usually chocolates, those like Hershey Nuggets. I keep a dish of those. So folks are coming by my office all day long, and they'll come in and grab a Hershey Nugget and check in with me. So it's one of those things that I do to try to be more inviting, to encourage folks to come in and come by and see me. In fact, quite a few folks know that if the candy dish is empty in my top right drawer, if I have any, that's where I keep the bags of candy to fill up the candy dish. And some folks are pretty comfortable about coming in and opening up that top right front drawer and grabbing some candy out. I don't care. I'm happy that they know about it. Do I have or should I have an expectation of privacy in that drawer where I keep the candy and pretty much everybody knows it? Have I
No,
given
it's
up
like you're
that
allowing
right?
it.
I've kind of surrendered that right to privacy. What about I've got some locked file cabinets where I've got some HR related files. Should I have an expectation of privacy in those things?
Yes.
Yes. And not only an expectation, I think I have a responsibility because I've got some sensitive information in those files that could be harmful if that information were shared. So it's not just a right, but also a responsibility. This is a fun question. So I'm a public employee. I work in a publicly owned building. I sit at my desk in my chair that was paid for with public funds. If a police officer comes in and says, we need to search Tim's office, do you think they should have a search warrant for that?
Definitely.
Or should they be able to just come in and search? Do Juanita say yes, they should? No search without a warrant. Okay. It's again, I'm a public employee in a public space, publicly owned building, publicly purchased desk. We haven't gotten to the equipment questions yet. In just a little bit. So I'm an employee of the government, and these people coming in to search are also, I mean, it's law enforcement. They're government employees too. I think the answer is probably yes. They would need to have a search warrant. There's a U.S. Supreme Court case that dealt with the situation to help us determine where the privacy rights exist for public employees. This was a split decision. 9 justices agreed that the Fourth Amendment does apply to public employee searches at work. So remember the Fourth Amendment, the right of the people to be secure in their possessions against unreasonable searches and seizures without a warrant on probable cause. So jump back. So the Fourth Amendment does apply, even though I'm a public employee, to searches at work. There were 2 tests that came out of this, and one of the things that the Supreme Court does when they're trying to decide a specific case, they often try to provide some guidance should a similar circumstance ever arise again, so that other courts can apply the same test. Most courts today are using what was called the operational realities test. I'm going to read through this just a little bit. So the operational realities of the workplace, however, may make some employees' expectations of privacy unreasonable when an intrusion is by a supervisor rather than a law enforcement official. Public employees' expectations of privacy in their offices, their desks, and file cabinets, like similar expectations of employees in the private sector, may be reduced by virtue of actual office practices and procedures or by legitimate regulation. So allowing folks to come in and go through my candy drawer anytime they want to get some candy, that practical reality of my practice may impact my expectation of privacy. An office is seldom a private enclave free from entry by supervisors, other employees, and business and personal invitees. In fact, my office is never a private enclave. It's a stream of folks all day long, every day. Instead, in many cases, offices are continually entered by fellow employees and other visitors during the workday for conferences, consultations, and other work-related visits. Simply put, it is the nature of government offices that others, such as fellow employees, supervisors, consensual visitors, and the general public, may have frequent access to an individual's office. So the nature of the way we behave, even as public employees, can impact what our expectation of privacy might be in this space. So let's put a little bit more modern twist on this. So I have a publicly owned computer. We store files on network drives on file servers in our computer room that were purchased with public funds. We store files in cloud accounts that are paid for with public funds. I use work email. My accounts are paid for with public funds. We use Microsoft Teams for text messaging, paid for with public funds. I personally do not have a work-provided cell phone. Jennifer thinks I'm an idiot for not doing that, but it is what it is. She has one, and she does no private stuff on her work phone and no work stuff on her private phone. And then what about a personal cell phone if I use it for work? So let's talk about these real quick. Should public employees have a right to privacy in files on my work laptop? Should I have any expectation of privacy at all?
I believe so.
Because why?
Your work laptop is owned by the company or whatever, but your files and your user profile, all that is owned by you.
Is it though? I mean, I log in. I follow the rules established by my organization, which is, again, it's a government organization. I don't know. Maybe, if I have a real interest in collecting recipes, and I decide I open my laptop and I create a folder for Tim's favorite recipes. Is that private information?
If it's on your profile, yes. But
Okay.
if your company says you're not allowed to look at perhaps recipes or something on the internet, and you go on the internet and do that and then put it on the computer and they find out and they decide to do some type of incident investigation, then no, you don't have the right to privacy.
So that's a little bit different now. So now you're saying, now if there's a rule that says you can't do that, then maybe not. So I like where you're going there. I mean, um I think you're headed in the right direction. And I think that may answer some of these other questions too. So if I store my recipes on my network drive, or if I store my recipes on my cloud drive, we use OneDrive primarily. We don't permit the use of Box and some of the other tools for cloud storage for work stuff. In email, so our policy permits some minimal personal use of equipment and storage and email. It's not against the rules. And in some organizations, I think there's an absolute prohibition on the use of company-owned or government-owned materials for any personal use. That's not the case in the organization where I work. So we're allowed some minimal personal use. I can go on Facebook during my lunch or during my break if I want to, even on my government-owned laptop, on my government-provided internet, but that's because of the policy that we have in place in our organization. What about the last two? The work-provided cell phone. Should there be a right to privacy in the work-provided cell phone?
Well, I feel like your call records and stuff, you wouldn't think it'd be private because I think that's something they could always access because I
Yes.
believe your phone is only supposed to be used for work related calls.
Yep. Yep. So even if we had a policy that said, oh, you can make some phone calls on your work phone, you can make personal phone calls, but that information is going to be public. It's if somebody sends a FOIA request and wants all of the call logs and all of the text messages on Tim Holtoff's work provided government cell phone, my organization excuse me, would provide that information. I wish Jennifer were here tonight because one of the most interesting things that she ever had to do was related to FOIA requests of a government employee. I should say a former employee. And again, this being a safe space, she can talk about it. But essentially, there were allegations of inappropriate behavior of an agency director and a Freedom of Information Act request for work cell phone information, and that information corroborated the malfeasance of that person, and that person is no longer an employee of the state. This final question, in my personal cell phone that I use for work. So I got some text messages. I use I don't want to carry around two phones. I don't want to. But I need to check my emails frequently. I have Microsoft Teams on my phone, so I'm in frequent communication even after hours with my team members on my phone. If somebody said we want all of the text messages, Teams messages, email messages from Tim Holtoff's phone related to something, some government related business. The fact of the matter is I would be required to provide that. And again, that's why Jennifer says, absolutely, I am not going to do government stuff on my personal phone. My personal phone is my business and nobody else's. I don't care. I really, there ain't nothing on here. I don't care. They can take it all. But it's a known risk. I know that by doing that activity on my phone, that it opens up my phone to an analysis potentially. Maybe if there were an allegation that I'd taken a $50,000 bribe to give some government contracts to somebody. I mean, I have some influence in the award of government contracts related to technology things. My phone would be a good source, and it would be appropriate for me to have to turn that thing over and again surrender my personal side of the information in spite of it. So I think again there is a zone of privacy on my personal phone, but because I do public work on my private phone, there is a zone of public information that if it were requested, I would be required to provide it. Catch up with some texts. I don't do private business on work devices because it's not private. That is an absolutely valid reason, Robin. We in the past, we used to offer several folks the option to have a work cell phone, and most of us just didn't want to bother with it. Because of the need for us to be readily available almost any time to respond to a technology need of a Supreme Court or Court of Appeals judge or justice. It's just the convenience of it, to me and others, justifies that surrender of a right of privacy in my privately owned cell phone. This is maybe this is an interesting thing too, and it's not in these questions, and we haven't done it in a while, but we used to partially reimburse employees who use their personal cell phones for business. And I kind of wonder if that's an even bigger door. I mean, the government is paying you for your public use of your private phone. That may be even a wider door to the right to inspect the contents of the phone than somebody doing it voluntarily like myself. Let's talk about private employees now for just a bit. So private employees, you work for Nestle or General Mills or Tesla. it's very different. I have no right to know what your salary is. Um, I, I, I have no right to walk into a Tesla building unless invited. So are private employees' rights a little bit different? Maybe in the office, in the desk, in a locked file cabinet. What do you guys think? A little bit different. Do you think that a private employee and those things might have a little bit more sense of privacy, a little bit more expectation than a public employee? So I think that there is no question on the last couple of questions. It is not questionable that law enforcement would have to have a warrant to come into Tesla and search the offices. There's absolutely no question about that. There would have to be a warrant, probable cause, to come in to your office and search your office. Yes, there would have to be a warrant. But what if Elon Musk was standing at the front door and opened the door? So let's say some law enforcement agency arrives, and Elon Musk invites them into the building, and they say, we want to search Jerica's office. We think there's something there that we need to know. Is that okay? I mean, they have no warrant, but Elon Musk, he owns the building, he owns your office. Can Elon say, come on in? Yeah, search Jerica's office all you want. What do you think?
I think so because he's the property owner, but I wouldn't think they have the ability to seize anything that belongs to me. So I'm not really sure.
So I think the answer is generally yes. Law enforcement has to have a warrant to search the private offices, and the employer, the owner, can consent to the search without a warrant. So, so many times on TV shows, we see the police knock at the door. Can we come in and search your premises? And, sometimes people say, no, you have to have a warrant. You're not coming in without a warrant. Maybe there's some interesting case law where, and this was kind of funny because I remember an incident when I was a little kid, but there's case law where a kid answers the door. The police come to the door, kid answers the door, parents are not home, kid says, come on in. Is that a valid search?
No.
The parents were not there to consent, and the kid was too young to appropriately consent. In this case, the employer, the owner of the premises, certainly can consent to a warrantless search of your office. When I was my sister married young. She married an Army guy. Their marriage was annulled, and when I was about 8, I guess, apparently after the annulment, her former husband had gone AWOL, and I remember it was 7 or 8 years old, and the FBI knocks on the door and opened the door. There's these 2 guys in suits, and they're asking about whether I know the location of my sister's former husband. I said, I haven't seen him in years and have no idea where he is. But again, this was a situation where, the law enforcement were talking to a kid. And, had they said, can we come in? I probably would have said, sure, why not? And, mom and dad were not home. Anyway, it was just one of those interesting moments in my life, where I freely shared information, because I was a kid and I was intimidated by the law enforcement officers. So we have a couple of cases. A person can have a reasonable expectation of privacy in an office at a private sector workplace. Capacity to claim the protection of the amendment depends not upon a property right in the invaded place, but upon whether the area was one in which there was a reasonable expectation of freedom from governmental intrusion. So again, we're talking about limitations on the government to act. Law enforcement officers are government employees, and these rights protect us from government actors. So yes, there is a reasonable expectation of privacy that you would be free from governmental intrusion. In the 2007 case, in the private employer context, employees retain at least some expectation of privacy in their offices, but the employer had common authority over the employee's computer and could give valid consent to search it, as well as the employee's office. So you were right on that point. If the boss says, come on in, look at whatever you want, they can override that expectation you might have. An employee has a reasonable expectation of privacy as to his office computer when he doesn't share it with others. Nobody else has regular access to it, and his employer does not engage in the practice of routine computer searches. So here are some other guidelines about what is reasonable. If you have your own office computer, you don't share it, nobody else has regular access to it, and there's no practice of routine searches, then you have an expectation of privacy. An employee lacks a reasonable expectation of privacy as to his workplace computer when the employer's internet use policy states that the company will monitor employees' internet use. So this is another twist. So if there is a policy that your use will be monitored, then you should have no reasonable expectation of privacy in your workplace computer. So let's take it on down a little bit. So in the private sector, should private employees have a right to privacy in the workplace? In computer files on their work laptop, in their computer files on a network drive, in their computer files on a cloud drive, in work email, text messages, a work provided cell phone, personal cell phone? What do you think the answer is?
Uh, to some of it, but I know I worked at a school before, and I had an email, like a school email, and I know a lot of people had access to my Google Drive for some reason. Like I guess the higher
Mhm.
ups, and principal, they all had access to that, so it wasn't private for sure.
Well, school employees are also public employees unless you work for a private school.
I worked for a private charter school.
A private charter school, yeah. So
Yeah.
so you were a private employee. Um, I think it all comes down to what's the policy and what are the circumstances. These two cases kind of give us an idea of what a reasonable expectation is. if the policy is you have no expectation of privacy on any of the stuff you do on your work computer, then you should have no expectation of privacy. So the company can explicitly take away that right of privacy that you may feel that you have in your work laptop, work network, work cloud storage, work email, work text messaging. So I think it really comes down to the right of the company to establish an expectation. Let's twist it a little bit more. And are any of you guys remote employees? Do you work remotely? Yes, no. So Robin, how do you think it might be different if you're working in your own home, possibly on your own laptop, using your own internet? Is your expectation of privacy greater than it would be in the office? Yeah. Now they have hub staff recording your screen at these companies. Yeah, I've got some links here. Strongly encourage all of you guys, especially those of you watching the recording, go out and take a look at some of these things. This became a really big deal in the fairly early days of the pandemic, when suddenly everybody was working remotely. There was a case where a kid on a school Zoom thing, the teacher saw a gun in the kid's bedroom back in the corner. I don't remember if it was a BB gun or a rifle or whatever, but obviously school policy, you can't have guns in schools. But the kid in his own home had a gun, and it was on the screen, and it caused a big uproar. Not sure my mic is working, but we have a policy that's expected that our devices are behind locked doors. That's interesting, and it's good that your company has specifically expressed that. There were during the pandemic years, there were all kinds of cases about folks using work-provided equipment in home offices for remote employees doing things that they ought not have been doing, and the implications of that. It's just interesting to me. It's just another twist. Even as a public employee, I'm no longer in a public space. I may be using my work provided equipment, but I'm paying for the electric bill. I'm paying for the internet. I'm paying for my desk. Should my privacy be the same? If my boss walked up to my door at my house, would I have to let him in? Robin, if your boss walks up to your door, are you required to let him in? Do they have to knock? No, you don't have to let your boss in the house, but you would. I don't know. Remote work, I think it threw some interesting twists into our privacy expectations, our work-related privacy expectations, while we're doing this work stuff at home. Let's see. For 8:15. I'm gonna push through. We've got a few more things wanna cover. So we had talked earlier about how the Constitution established some expectations of privacy, some rights of privacy. We've also had some specific legislation that has done the same thing. The Electronic Communications Privacy Act, the Stored Communications Act, have started building this expectation of privacy when we're talking on a telephone, or the information that we store in email. The modern world is adapting to these expectations of privacy in the stuff that we generate. I'm not going to really talk about these, but here are a couple of quick guides about complying with the Electronic Communication Privacy Act. This the wiretap stuff, even at the dawn of telephones, the government was quick to figure out ways to eavesdrop on telephone conversations, primarily for law enforcement purposes, to capture the bad guys. Some of I think some of the most famous movies of those times were about the rum runners during Prohibition, and the efforts of the government to track them down. Organized crime started growing as our communities grew and the technology grew. So law enforcement has always struggled to keep up with the modern technologies in order to do their job. Title I of the Electronic Communications Protection Act, Wiretap Act, prohibits the intentional, actual, or attempted interception, use, disclosure, or procurement of any other person excuse me, to intercept or endeavor to intercept any wire, oral, or electronic communication. So this is the government doesn't have the right to listen into all of our conversations. I mean, that's at the core. There are some exceptions to that. Typically, it requires some judicial authority. So a judge may issue a warrant authorizing interception of communications for up to 30 days upon a showing of probable cause that the interception will reveal evidence that an individual has committed or is about to commit a particular offense. So again, we're even though the laws are adapting to the changing technology, we're also trying to adapt the government to put appropriate restraint on the actions of the government. The Stored Communications Act protects the privacy of the contents of files stored by service providers and of records held about the subscriber by service providers, such as subscriber name, billing records, or IP addresses. This is similar to the laws that allowed libraries to refuse to disclose who checked out a certain book. Although, I mean, there was a time where when you checked out a book, you wrote your name on there, so it was pretty obvious who had the book before you. So where the technology is advancing, it's getting we're increasingly relying on these technologies to transmit and store and record information. At the same time, the law is trying to keep up and provide appropriate safeguards to our expectation of privacy. This is the warning banner that everybody in the Justice Building sees when they log into their computers. So it's an example of a notice essentially saying you should have no expectation of privacy. The National Labor Relations Act ensures that employees, whether unionized or not, can engage in concerted activity under the NLRA. So this is, basically about union activity where they're working together to complain about workplace conditions and other issues pertaining to the terms and conditions of employment. Broad social media policies that restrict disparaging or vulgar comments run afoul of Section 7 if they can be construed as potentially extending to concerted activity. So it's been a big deal the last couple of weeks about public figures and private employees who have been terminated over social media posts. The general rule is that yes, we have a right to speak our minds, but that doesn't mean that we're free from the consequences of our speech. And private actors protecting a brand have a lot of leeway in what they can do about that. This is one of those exceptions. So if the social media posts were impacting concerted activity regarding workplace conditions and other issues pertaining to the terms and conditions of employment, then it might not be appropriate. It might not be permissible to terminate those employees. NLRA does not prohibit restricting individual outbursts by employees that are not part of concerted activity with other employees. So again, someone puts something on social media and complaints erupt about that. There's no protection here against losing your job. NLRA does not protect insulting people or the company or revealing confidential information that does not pertain to the terms and conditions of employment. Any thoughts about that? In Arkansas, we have some very specific legal requirements prohibiting employers from requiring employees to share or connect on social media accounts. While it's certainly possible to go out and view the public posts of somebody on LinkedIn or Facebook or Twitter or whatever, it is absolutely impermissible for an employer to require and even request or suggest a current or prospective employee to disclose the username and password. So that was something that you had mentioned earlier, that you've got a sense of privacy in that, or change the privacy settings associated with your social media account. So here's a specific social media protection that's afforded under Arkansas law. This section does not prohibit an employer from viewing information about a current or prospective employee that is publicly available on the internet. So I can go out and look up your stuff before I offer you a job. Or even if you're a current employee, I can go and look up your stuff that you put out there in the public. But I can't require you to friend me in order to be able to see more information. All right, we're at the end of tonight's class. The applause is deafening. What did we do tonight? We tried to understand the importance of privacy impact assessments. We need to be mindful of where our rights to privacy originate and consider our responsibilities as technologists. We talked some about employment privacy, so it's a little bit of a twist. Where does this zone of privacy begin and end in the workplace? And then how do we let employees know that monitoring may impact their expectation of privacy and the company's right? It's been a fun night, you guys. It would have been even more fun if there were like faces in the classroom, but I'll take what I can get. Appreciate you guys for engaging in the discussion. This is like my first full lecture night. The next few are going to be sort of along these same lines. So we'll kind of delve into assignment related stuff, and then we'll go into some law related stuff. But this is basically the structure that you guys should expect for the next few. Any questions? I am going to stop my share. You're having problems with recording. All recordings are, the recording will be, it'll finish here soon, hopefully, when I turn it off and be available. Emmanuel, let me know though, by email or whatever, if you have any trouble viewing the recording afterwards.
Yeah, last time I was trying to watch you, but I thought maybe some or how to get the video.
Yeah, you're breaking up really bad.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, shoot me a message if you have it, or shoot a message to me and Jennifer. When the recording is done, you should be able to download and watch
Okay.
at your convenience. Okay. But if there's any problems, please do let us know.
Okay.
All right. Well, thank you guys for a fun evening. I'm sorry I'm not as entertaining as a stand-up comic, but I do appreciate your time and thank you for giving me an opportunity to spend some time with you. Hope you have a good evening. We'll see you guys next week.